As defined by Merriam-Webster, death is the end of life. It is the irreversible cessation of all vital functions. Death. It is a concept and human eventuality that has plagued the mind for millions of years, leading us to create rituals, practices, and even technologies to cope, accept, and reject this eventuality. Professor Yair Dor Zitterman conducted research at Bar-Ilan University in Israel, found that through a test using magnetoencephalography visual mismatch paradigm, the brain actively denies death associated to the self, and that ultimately the brain shields us from existential fear by categorizing death as an unfortunate event that only befalls other people. This new research aligns with centuries of rituals of coping. Traditionally, 3 things happen to a dead person across cultures. 1, they are buried. 2, they are cremated. And 3, they are mummified. I had the experience of visiting Madagascar in 2019 and witnessed a famadihana on the way to the Tsingy National Park. This is a funerary tradition of the Malagasy people. During the ceremony, known as the turning of the bones, people bring forth the bodies of their ancestors from the family crypts. They rewrap the corpses in fresh cloth and rewrite their names on the cloths so that they will always be remembered. It's one of many indigenous traditions that seek to create a partnership between the living and the dead, and the not yet born. It felt like celebration, crowds of people coming together to celebrate and remember their loved ones. Rituals like these attempt to answer the simple question of should and how can humans stay in touch with the dead. What we can agree upon is that when a person dies, their status changes. Their status is no longer alive, but no longer part of the living society. And yet, rituals like the famadihana attempt to create a relationship between the living and the dead. The problem of death, the grief, reverence, the academic, the religious, the cultural institutions that we have created, the practices around death. These traditions can be defined as traditional beliefs regarding death. Yes, an ancestor may be technically dead, but the dead can retain a status as the ancestors. They may be called upon, even consulted, but ultimately that is the extent of the relationship with the living. But these traditions do not negate the fact that in their physical forms, these ancestors will never come back. Their soul and energy may be present and may influence the actions and beliefs of the living present, but the relationship between the living and the dead is a purely metaphorical and metaphysical experience. No one believes that the living will one day awake and resume the lives they once lived. It is through our understanding that we will one day die that we have created codes of conduct and a value system of morals. The eventuality of death, underpinned by religious theology, influences how we live our lives. Thou shalt not kill. Treat thy neighbor as thyself. These are all values we abide by in order to secure our place in the afterlife. But a new movement is emerging. Trans-humanism is the attempt to answer the question of the human limit. The premise that the human species in its current form does not represent the end of our development, but rather a comparatively early phase. This extends to death. Transhumanists are frustrated by the human body. They believe options are pretty limited. One can adjust their diets, use plastic surgery, but there are limitations. The desire to find a solution to these problems is not new. We've seen mummies, gravestones, shrines, but now we are using a different means to address this problem. Enter the information and technological age. The concept of transhumanism can be viewed through a myriad of lenses, all with the intention of finding a way to overcome the constraints of the human body, the question of death, and the extent to which technological advances can have on the everyday. There are different ways that people see transhumanism, each finding a way to extend life. Some are using cryonics, others are betting on the belief that our human minds and consciousness will be uploaded to a metanet using technology such as Neuralink. Others are more conservative, using AI bots fed with data that will allow for communication with the deceased relatives. The science is far-fetched and oftentimes science fiction, but the underlying human desires are very human. In contrast to traditional beliefs, clients that use Alcor a cryonic service provider that freezes dead bodies and brains with the intent that someday, when science is at the point they can be brought back, are betting on the belief that a second chance at life is possible. Kim Suozzi, the main protagonist in the BBC podcast titled Death is a Bore, is one of Alcor's growing list of patients. Proclaimed dead at age 23 due to cancer, both Kim and her partner Josh felt that she was robbed of life too soon. Kim signed up to have her brain undergo cryonics. For Kim and Josh, this procedure gave them hope and some level of console. When his time comes, Josh plans to also undergo cryonics so that one day the two can be resurrected together once again. There is resistance to cryonics. Some believe cryonics is robbing the dying of their dignity. It's deceit and extortion. It's merely a coping mechanism and are playing at the fear of death. Others may argue that even if the science for unfreezing and bringing people back to life is never invented, one doesn't lose anything. They are anyway dead. The case of Roman Mazurenko begins on November 28th in Moscow, Russia. Distracted by his phone, Roman becomes a victim to a speeding car, struck to death. His friend Kuida, deeply saddened by her friend's passing and working on an AI startup, decides to bring Roman back to life. Using AI, Roman's old text messages, and smart algorithms, Roman is resurrected. Kuida, who felt that Roman's unexpected passing left her unable to say her last goodbyes to Roman, had finally found a way to find more closure. Although not Roman, the AI shares certain aspects of Roman's identity. Like a responding gravestone, it allows for the living to share intimate moments with Roman. Ways, these types of memorial tech-enhanced rituals will become mainstream in the 21st century. Even though Roman's father felt that the AI didn't do his son justice, many of Roman's friends enjoyed having the ability to speak to Roman in a focused and candid way. Today, we have wide troves of personal data, images, videos, relationship text messages, videos of our engagements. It is not far-fetched that as technology increases, AI bots will be able to use all that data to create a digital twin far more realistic than Roman. Quite frankly, I would as well. I do see a caveat. The extension of the self post-death changes the definition of the self. In traditional deaths, the deceased self is buried and the impression, the personality snapshot, is taken. This snapshot is then attributed to the person when spoken about, when prayed to, when a memorandum to. But if we're able to extend the definition of the living, if through an AI or another technological means we were able to communicate with another version of the deceased individual, it's an ever-evolving personality snapshot. It can very much confuse the person. I can imagine the future, Neuralink implanted, cryonics booked, AI bots set up. Death, here we come. I am a huge proponent for new traditions and ways of dealing with death. Although I would like to have a Jewish burial, sans the cryonics unfortunately, I am interested in finding ways to extend my identity. I believe it will help my family get more closure, and it will also help the future generations know the past generations. I do worry about the possible implications, such as data privacy and identity theft. What if my AI does a bad job impersonating me? I believe that we are still far away, but as a species, we will always find a way to answer the old age problem of death.